The first thing I noticed was the moving truck. It was parked sideways across my driveway, the kind of careless angle a person uses when they believe the property already belongs to them. The morning was still grey, the sun barely behind the oak tree at the corner of Briar Lane, and I had walked outside with my coffee mug in one hand and a folded jacket over my arm. Because I was supposed to drive to a job site in Hartford, and I was already running 10 minutes late. I stopped on the second step of my own porch. A man in a navy polo shirt was standing near the open back of the truck, holding a clipboard. A woman in jeans was lifting a small lamp out of a cardboard box like she was unwrapping something fragile. Behind them, a little boy, maybe 4 years old, was running across my front yard with his arms out, pretending the wind could lift him. I should have spoken first. I should have asked them what they were doing. But for a long, stupid second, I just stood there, because my brain was trying to figure out which house I was looking at. It was definitely mine. The blue shutters I had repainted last spring. The crooked porch light my husband had installed before he died. The wreath my daughter had made out of dried lavender, still hanging on the door behind me. The woman saw me. She smiled. The kind of polite, careful smile you give a neighbor on a first day. "Hi," she said. "Are you the cleaner?" I did not answer right away. I could feel the coffee getting cold in my hand. "No," I said. "I live here." Her smile did not move, but something behind it did. The man with the clipboard walked closer. He had kind eyes. He did not look like a criminal. He looked like an accountant who liked baseball. "I'm sorry," he said. "I think there is some confusion. We closed on this property last Friday. The keys were handed over yesterday afternoon." "That's not possible." "We have the paperwork right here. Mr. Calvin Mercer signed the final documents on the 17th. Calvin Mercer. My father. The coffee mug slipped about an inch in my hand before I caught it. I did not drop it. I want that on the record. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not yell at strangers who did not deserve to be yelled at. I just stood there, on the porch of the house I had bought 11 years ago, listening to a man in a navy polo shirt explain to me, very gently, that I no longer owned it. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Yes, he said. "I think there must be." But his eyes had already changed. He had seen this kind of thing before. He had seen what people did to each other when there was money involved. He was already calculating which lawyer to call. I walked back into the house without answering. I closed the door behind me. I locked it, which was a useless gesture, because the lock no longer belonged to me either. I set the coffee mug on the kitchen counter and I sat down on the bottom step of the staircase and I tried to remember how to breathe in even counts. My name is Diane Mercer. I was 47 years old that morning. I had been a widow for 6 years. I had one daughter, Hannah, who was a junior at the University of Vermont. I had a job I was good at, friends who called on Sundays, and a savings account that was not impressive but was steady. I had built a quiet, careful life out of what was left after my husband died, and the foundation of that life, the thing I had stood on while everything else fell apart, was this house. The house my father had just sold without telling me. I picked up my phone. My hands were not shaking, which surprised me. I scrolled past my daughter's name. Past my brother's. I called my father. It rang 4 times. He let it go to voicemail. I called again. He answered on the second ring, and his voice was bright, the way it always was when he was about to tell a lie he had already practiced. "Diane, sweetheart, I was going to call you this afternoon. Dad, I said. There are people in my driveway. There was a pause. A short one. But long enough that I knew, in that pause, that everything the man with the clipboard had said was true. I can explain, my father said. And I knew, in that moment, that he could not. To understand what my father did, you have to understand what he thought I was. Calvin Mercer was 73 years old. He had been a regional sales manager for an industrial valve company for 31 years before he retired. He wore button-down shirts even on weekends. He believed in firm handshakes, in showing up early, in never letting a woman pay for her own meal in his presence. He was, by every metric the world hands out, a respectable man. He was also a man who had decided, somewhere around the time I was 9 years old, that I was the disappointment of the family. It was not loud. It was never loud. My father did not yell at me. He did not hit me. He did not call me names. What he did was something quieter and, in some ways, harder to name. He looked through me. At every dinner, every birthday, every holiday, his attention skipped over my chair the way a stone skips over a pond. My older brother, Marcus, was the one he leaned toward. My younger sister, Renee, was the one he laughed with. I was the one he asked to clear the plates. I had spent most of my life trying to understand why. The cleanest answer I ever found was this: my mother had wanted 3 children, and my father had wanted 2. I was the third. He had agreed to me, the way you agree to a remodel you cannot afford, and then he had spent the rest of his life quietly resenting the cost. He never said that. He did not have to. When I was 16, I got into a college my father did not approve of, and he did not come to the graduation. When I was 23, I married a man named Daniel Reyes, who was Puerto Rican and worked in construction. And my father shook his hand at the wedding the way you shake the hand of a man selling you a used car. When Hannah was born, my father held her for exactly 4 minutes and handed her back. When Daniel died of a heart attack at 43, on a Tuesday afternoon, with no warning and no goodbye, my father came to the funeral in a grey suit and told me, in the parking lot afterward, that I should consider selling the house because, and these are his exact words, "Your woman alone shouldn't be carrying that kind of mortgage." I did not sell the house. I worked 2 jobs for the first year. I cashed in Daniel's small life insurance policy. I cut every cost I could cut. I kept the house, because the house was where Daniel had carried Hannah on his shoulders into the kitchen on Saturday mornings, and I was not going to let that disappear too. I paid off the mortgage for years later. I was 45. I held the deed in my hands at the bank, and I cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I drove home. My father, when I told him, said, well, good. That's one less thing." He thought I was the daughter who got lucky. The daughter who, somehow, despite her bad choices, had landed on her feet. He thought I had been carried by Daniel's life insurance, by luck, by the kindness of the system. He did not know that I had been carried by nothing except my own stubbornness, and that the house was not just a house to me. It was the proof. He did not know, because he had never asked. And that is why, when the offer came, he believed he had the right to take it. There was a story my father liked to tell at family dinners. It went like this. When he was 31 years old, his own father, my grandfather, had loaned him $8,000 to put a down payment on his first house. My father had paid it back, with interest, in 3 years. He told this story the way other men tell war stories. With pride. With a small shake of the head at how hard things used to be. With the unspoken assumption that this was what fathers did. They helped. They built. They handed things down. What he never mentioned, in any version of that story, was that he had never done the same for me. When Daniel and I were saving for our first house, the one before this one, the small one in Waterbury that we lived in until Hannah turned 6, we asked my father for a loan. Not a gift. A loan. $5,000 to cover the closing costs. We had the rest. We had worked for 2 years to have the rest. He said no. He did not say no cruelly. He said no the way a banker says no. He said the timing was bad. He said he had to think about his retirement. He said Daniel, who had been working 60 hours a week for the same construction company for 4 years, did not have, and again I quote, the kind of stability a young family needs. 2 months later, he gave my brother Marcus $22,000 to start a landscaping business that failed in 18 months. I never asked him about that. I never threw it in his face. I never brought it up at Thanksgiving or Christmas or on the long quiet drive home from my mother's funeral. I let it sit, the way you let an old wound sit when you have decided that picking at it will not help you heal. But I remembered it. I remembered all of it. I remembered the way he had stood at my wedding and made a toast about how marriage was about, his words. A man's willingness to protect what he has built. I remembered the way he had called Hannah's birth a complication in front of my mother in the hospital hallway. Not knowing I was around the corner with a paper cup of vending machine coffee. I remembered the way, 6 months after Daniel's funeral, he had sent me a letter, an actual paper letter, suggesting that I move in with him and Renee. And that the rent money I would save by selling my house could be put toward, his words, a more sensible long-term plan. I had written back. 1 line. Dad, I am not selling the house. He had not mentioned it again. Not for 6 years. Not, that is, until the offer came. I learned, later, in pieces, how it had happened. A developer had been buying up properties on my side of Briar Lane. He was planning a small cluster of higher-end townhomes. He wanted 3 adjacent lots, and mine was the middle one. He had approached my father, not me, because my father's name was the one on the original paperwork from when the house had first changed hands 11 years ago. Daniel and I had bought the house from a cousin of my father's, and my father had been listed as a co-signer at the time. For reasons that had to do with our credit and Daniel's relatively new employment. We had refinanced 2 years later, removed my father's name from the loan, and added our own. The deed, the actual deed, had been in my name and Daniel's name. After Daniel died, it had transferred fully to mine. My father, somehow, in his head, had never updated the file. He had believed, or had chosen to believe, that the house was still partially his. He had believed that he had the right to negotiate. He had believed that I would be relieved. He had believed that the $420,000 the developer was offering would solve, in one clean transaction, what he saw as my long, slow, embarrassing struggle. And so, while I was at a job site in Hartford on a Tuesday, he had walked into a title office with a man he had never met before, and he had signed papers he did not have the legal right to sign. He had used a forged signature for mine. He had told them I was unavailable. He had told them I had agreed by phone. He had told them, with the practiced confidence of a man who had spent 31 years selling industrial valves, that everything was in order. And someone, somewhere, had not checked. I can explain, he said. I was still sitting on the bottom step of my staircase. The strangers were still in my driveway. The little boy was still running across my yard, and I could hear him now, faintly, through the door, shouting something about a dragon. Dad, I said. My voice was very calm. I noticed that. I noticed how calm my voice was, and I noticed that this was probably not a good sign. Did you sell my house? Diane, did you sell my house? He was quiet. I could hear him breathing. I could hear, in the background, the small clatter of a coffee cup against a saucer. He was at Renee's, probably. He spent most mornings at Renee's now, since my mother had passed. I made a decision, he said finally. I made a decision for the family. What decision? A man came to me with an offer. A very generous offer. And I thought, this is exactly what Diane needs. This is the answer. She's been alone in that house for too long. It's too much for her. It's too much for anyone. And the money, Dad. The money would set Hannah up for the rest of college. It would give you a fresh start. You could move closer to us. You could, Dad. Diane, listen to me. I did this for you. There it was. The line he had been rehearsing. The line he had probably said to himself, in the mirror, on the morning he walked into the title office. I did this for you. The 4 words that had structured every cruelty of my entire life. He had not given Marcus the money instead of me for me. He had not skipped my graduation for me. He had not looked through my chair at every birthday I had ever had for me. But he had decided, somewhere along the way, that the story of his life was a story of sacrifice on my behalf, and he was going to die believing it. No matter what he had to do to keep that story standing. Dad, I said, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly. Did you sign my name? He did not answer. Did you sign my name on the deed? He did not answer. Dad. It was a formality, he said. The lawyer said, what lawyer? A friend of the buyer's. A perfectly respectable, ad. Did you sign my name? Diane, the money is already in escrow. It's done. There's no point in, I hung up. I sat there on the step for a long time. I do not know how long. The strangers eventually knocked on the door, gently, the way you knock when you are afraid of the answer. I opened it. The man with the clipboard was holding his phone. He said. I've called my attorney. I think we need to wait before we unload anything else. Yes, I said. I think we do. The woman was holding the little boy's hand now. He was looking up at me with the kind of open, curious face that small children have before the world teaches them to hide. He had a smear of something that might have been jelly on his chin. He smiled at me. I smiled back, because none of this was his fault. We're really sorry, the woman said. We didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. Please. Take the truck somewhere safe. I'll figure out where you can stay tonight. It's okay, I said. I promise. It's not you. They left an hour later. They had been kind. They had been gentle. They were not the enemy. They were a young family who had saved for 10 years and trusted the wrong piece of paper. I stood in my own kitchen, in my own house, which was somehow no longer my house, and I called the only person in my family I still trusted. My cousin Laner. A real estate attorney in Albany. She picked up on the first ring. Laner, I said. I need you to drive down here. She did not ask why. She did not ask when. She said, I'll be there by 3. That was the first thing that made me cry. Lena arrived at 2:50. She had brought a leather work bag, a thermos of coffee, and the kind of expression she usually saved for difficult depositions. She walked through my house slowly, the way a doctor walks into a hospital room. She looked at the front door, the locks, the windows. She looked at the hallway where Hannah's height was marked in pencil against the doorframe. She did not say anything about any of it. She set her bag on the kitchen table and she said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't skip anything because you think it's small." I told her everything. The developer. My father. The signature. The escrow. The $420,000. Marcus and his failed landscaping business. The $5,000 my father had refused to lend us. The letter he had sent me after Daniel died. The way he had stood in the parking lot at the funeral and told me a woman alone should not be carrying that kind of mortgage. She wrote things down. Not on a yellow pad. On a small black notebook with a rubber band around it. She did not interrupt me. She did not react. When I was finished, she set down her pen. "Diane," she said. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." "Okay." "Where is the original deed?" I almost laughed. Of all the questions I had expected, that was the first one I had not. "It's in the safe deposit box," I said. "At the credit union on Main." "And who has access to the safe deposit box?" "Just me." "Not your father?" "No." "Not your brother?" "Not your sister?" "No." "Has anyone been listed as a co-renter or alternate on that box, ever, at any point in the last 11 years?" "No." "Lena?" "Just me." "Just me and Daniel, originally, and after he died, just me." She nodded slowly. She made a small note in her black book. Then she looked up at me. "Then your father did something even stupider than I thought." "What do you mean?" "He sold a house using a deed he didn't have. He signed a document that doesn't match the real deed. He used a notary who didn't verify the original instrument. He's not in trouble for a family dispute, Diane. He's in trouble for fraud." I stared at her. "I know this is your father," she said, more gently. "I know. But I need you to understand what we're looking at. This isn't a he said, she said. This isn't a misunderstanding about an old will. This is a man who walked into a title office and signed someone else's name on a transaction worth almost $500,000. The buyer is going to want their money back. The developer is going to scream. The title company is going to scream louder. And someone, very soon, is going to call the sheriff." I sat down. I did not remember standing up. But somehow I was standing, and now I was sitting again. "What do I do?" I said. "Right now," she said, "you don't do anything. You don't call him back. You don't call your brother. You don't call your sister. You don't post anything. You don't talk to the buyers again without me. You go upstairs, and you find every piece of paper related to this house. Mortgage records. Refinance records. Tax bills. Insurance. Everything. You put it on this table. And then we are going to call a friend of mine at the county recorder's office. And we are going to make sure the real chain of title is sitting in front of the sheriff before your father is." I went upstairs. I opened the top drawer of my dresser. Inside, under a folded scarf my mother had given me the year before she died, was a green folder Daniel had labeled in his small, careful handwriting. House. Just that. House. I had not opened it since the year he died. I brought it down to the kitchen. Lena pulled out a chair for me. She poured me coffee from her thermos. We opened the folder together. Daniel had been the kind of man who kept everything. The original purchase agreement. The first mortgage statement. The refinance documents from 2014. The insurance binder. The deed, in a separate plastic sleeve, with the seal still bright. He had even kept the inspection report. He had even kept the email from the inspector where the inspector had joked about the squirrels in the attic. Lena went through it page by page. When she got to the deed, she held it up to the light and looked at it for a long time. Diane, she said. This is clean. What does that mean? It means that whatever your father signed last Friday, it has nothing to do with this house. Legally. This deed, in my hand right now, is the real deed. Yours is the only name on it. There is no scenario at all, in which what your father did is enforceable. So the house is still mine. The house, she said, it was never anything but yours. I did not cry. I had thought I would. I had thought, when she said those words, that something in me would crack open and pour out. But I did not. I just sat there at my kitchen table, holding the deed Daniel had filed away 11 years ago, and I felt, for the first time since I had stepped out onto the porch that morning, something steady underneath me. Lena, I said. Yes. I want to ask you something. Okay. I don't want to destroy him. She looked at me for a long moment. I know, she said. But Diane, you're not the one destroying him. He did that the moment he walked into that title office. The only question now is how much of the truth gets to come out, and who gets to say it. She closed the green folder. And I think, she said, you should be the one who says it. He invited me to dinner on Thursday. He called Hannah first, the way he always did when he wanted to soften an approach. He told her he was worried about me. He told her that there had been a small confusion with some paperwork, and that he wanted to sit down with the family and to clear the air. He told her he hoped I would come, because, his words, your mother can be very stubborn when she's hurt. Hannah called me crying. Not because she believed him. Because she knew him. Mom, she said. Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. But I think you should go. Why? Because if you don't, he gets to write the story. And I don't want him to write the story. She was 20 years old. She had been 20 for 4 months. And in that one sentence, on the phone, she became the woman I had spent 20 years trying to raise. I drove to Renee's house on Thursday at 6. Lena drove behind me in her own car. We had agreed she would wait 2 streets over, in a coffee shop, with her phone on. She had given me a small recorder, the kind that fit inside the pocket of my coat. She had told me that Connecticut was a one-party consent state. I had asked her 3 times. She had said it 3 times. I trusted her, but I wanted to be sure. Renee opened the door. She was wearing her work clothes still, a grey cardigan and a string of small pearls. She hugged me. She did not look me in the eyes. Marcus was already there. He was sitting on the couch with a beer in his hand. He stood up when I came in and walked over and gave me the kind of hug that men in our family gave when they wanted to be on record as having tried. Diane, he said. We're going to figure this out. Are we? Come on. Sit down. Dad just wants to talk. My father was in the dining room. He was already seated at the head of the table, even though no one else had sat down yet. He had a glass of red wine in front of him. He had put on a button-down shirt and combed his hair back. He looked, to anyone who did not know him, like a man hosting a small celebration. Diane, he said. Sit. Please. We have a lot to discuss. Saturday. Renee brought out a casserole. Marcus opened another beer. My father said grace, which he had not done at any family meal I could remember in 15 years. He thanked God, in his even, measured voice, for family, and for the chance to repair what had been briefly broken. Then he looked at me. Diane, he said. I owe you an apology. I should have spoken to you before I signed those papers. I see that now. I let my excitement about the offer get ahead of my judgment, and for that, I am truly sorry. I did not answer. But I want you to understand something, he went on. The offer is still on the table. The buyer is willing to be patient. I have spoken to him. He is a reasonable man. And what I want, what we all want, is for this to end in a way that benefits everyone. Including you, I said. He paused. Including the family, he said. How much? I asked. How much what? How much were you going to keep? The dining room went very quiet. Renee stopped chewing. Marcus put down his beer. Diane, my father said. His voice had a small edge in it now. That is not the conversation. Yes, it is, I said. That's exactly the conversation. You sold my house for $420,000. The money is in escrow. How much of that money was going to come to me, and how much of it was going to be, in your words, restructured for the family? He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his beer. There were plans, my father said carefully. Plans for Marcus's new venture. Plans for Renee's children's education. Plans for my own care, eventually. Plans that, how much? Diane, how much? 140,000, he said. Was the figure we discussed. $140,000. Out of 420. Not even a third. He had planned to take 2/3 of the value of my house, the house I had paid for myself, the house Daniel had died inside, and distribute it to my siblings and to himself. And he had planned to hand me a check for $140,000 and tell me that I should be grateful. I see, I said. Diane, listen. It's still a lot of money. It's more money than you've ever had at one time. And if you would just, Dad. Be reasonable about this, Dad. We can still make this work for everyone. Dad, I said. Did you forge my signature? He stopped. The whole table stopped. Did you forge my signature on the deed? I said. Yes or no? Renee was looking at me now. So was Marcus. There was a kind of slow, dawning understanding moving across both of their faces, the kind of understanding that arrives late and changes the temperature of a room. It was a formality, my father said. Yes or no? Diane, the buyer needed the paperwork to move forward, and you were, yes or no, Dad. It is a very simple question. He set down his wine glass. His hand was steady. He looked at me with the same look he had used at every dinner of my entire life. The look that said, "You are the problem here. You. The difficult one. The complication. The third child." "Yes," he said. "I signed your name. And I would do it again, if it meant making sure this family did not lose an opportunity because of one woman's stubbornness." I let his words sit in the room. I did not say anything for a long time. Renee was crying, quietly, without sound. Marcus had his face in his hand. "Thank you," I said finally. "That's what I needed to hear." I stood up. I picked up my coat. I walked to the front door. My father was saying something behind me. I do not remember what. I closed the door behind me, and I walked down the driveway, and I got into my car, and I drove 3 blocks to the coffee shop where Lena was waiting with her laptop open. I sat down across from her. "Did you get it?" she said. I took the recorder out of my coat pocket and slid it across the table. She did not smile. She just nodded once, slowly, and reached into her bag for an envelope I had not seen her bring in. "Then I think it's time," she said, "for you to read what's in here." The envelope was thick. It was the kind of envelope a lawyer hands you when they are about to change the shape of your life. It had no name on it, just a small printed tag in the upper corner that read, in plain type, Mercer Arraez, estate file. I did not recognize the file name. "What is this?" I said. "Open it." I opened it. Inside were 3 documents. The top one was a single page, typed on heavy cream paper, dated 11 years earlier. It was signed by Daniel. My husband. My dead husband, whose careful handwriting I would have recognized in the dark. It was a sworn statement. A short one. He had filed it with Lena, in her capacity as our family attorney, 2 weeks after we closed on the house. In the statement, Daniel attested that the funds for the down payment on the property at 47 Briar Lane had come entirely from my personal savings, accumulated over the previous 9 years from my own employment, with no contribution from Calvin Mercer or any other member of the Mercer family. He attested that he was providing this statement at my request, not for divorce purposes, but as a permanent record, in the event that, his words, any member of my wife's family ever attempts, after my death or hers, to claim a financial interest in this property based on family contribution. He had signed it. It had been notarized. I did not understand for a moment. And then I did. He had known. Daniel had known, 11 years ago, that one day someone in my family was going to try to take this house from me. He had not known it would be my father. He had not known when. He had just known it would happen. He had filed a piece of paper to make sure it could not. I looked up at Lena. She was watching me carefully. "He came to me 3 weeks after you moved in," she said. "He sat in my office for an hour. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to feel ashamed of your family. He just wanted there to be a record. He said, and I'm quoting, 'I'm not always going to be standing next to her. I want her to be standing on something solid when I'm not.'" I did not cry. I do not know why. Some part of me, the part that had been bracing for impact since the moment I had stepped onto the porch on Tuesday morning, simply let go of one of its hands. "There's more," Elena said. "Keep going." The second document was a copy of the original mortgage discharge from when I had paid off the house, 2 years earlier. My name only. Clean. The third document was the one that changed everything. It was a letter. Handwritten. From my mother. It was dated 4 months before she died. She had written it to Lena. Not to me. To Laner. She had written it knowing that Laner, eventually, when the time came, would be the one to give it to me. I read it twice. I read it 3 times. I read it until I had every line of it inside me. My mother had written that she knew. She had known, for a very long time, what my father was. She had known how he had looked at me. She had known what he had said about Daniel. She had known about Marcus's $22,000. She had known about the $5,000 my father had refused to give us. She had known about the letter he had sent me after Daniel's funeral. She had also known something else. In 1998, my father had taken out a second mortgage on the family home, without my mother's knowledge, to cover a business loss he had never told her about. The mortgage had been paid off, eventually, but it had been paid off with money from her own inheritance, money her mother had left her. Money my father had withdrawn from a joint account by signing her name on the withdrawal slip. He had forged her signature. She had known. She had not divorced him, because in 1998 she was 49 years old, she had 3 children still living at home. And she had been raised in a generation where you did not leave a man over $31,000. But she had kept the withdrawal slip. She had kept the bank statement. She had kept the small, careful note her own mother had given her with the inheritance, which named the money, specifically, as for Eileen and her daughters. She had kept all of it in a manila envelope at the back of her closet, behind her wedding dress, for 26 years. In the letter, she told Laner where to find it. She told Laner to give it to me, only, when, in her words, if the day comes that he tries it again, on Diane, because he will. She had ended the letter with one line. Tell my daughter that I am sorry I was not braver. Tell her that I am giving her the bravery I never used. I sat there in the coffee shop for a long time. Laner did not say anything. She just sat across from me with her hands folded. She knew, I said finally. Yes. She knew, and she waited. She waited for you to be ready. How did she know I would be? Lena smiled, for the first time that day. A small, sad smile. Diane, she said. She knew because she watched you for 4 to 6 years. The sheriff came on Saturday morning. It was 9:15. I had been awake since 6. I had made coffee, eaten half a piece of toast, and laid out, on the kitchen table, in the order Laner had told me to lay them out, 6 documents. The real deed. Daniel's sworn statement from 11 years ago. The mortgage discharge. A certified copy of my mother's letter. A photocopy of the 1998 bank withdrawal slip my father had signed in her name. And the transcript, prepared by Laner's office the morning before, of the recording I had made at Renee's house on Thursday night. The knock was firm but not loud. I opened the door. The deputy was a woman in her 40s, with short brown hair and a quiet face. Her name tag read R. Alvarez. Behind her, on the porch, was another deputy, younger, and behind him, walking up the driveway slowly with his hands in his coat pockets, was my father. He looked old. I had not noticed, in 20 years, how old he had become. He was wearing the same button-down shirt he had worn at dinner. He had not shaved. Deputy Alvarez looked at me. Mrs. Reyes, she said. I apologize for the early hour. We've had a complaint filed regarding a contested real estate transaction at this address. The buyer's attorney has alleged title fraud. We're not here to arrest anyone today. We're here to gather information and to make sure all parties have a chance to be heard. I understand. Your father has come with us voluntarily. He has asked to be present when we speak with you. He says that the transaction was authorized. He says I authorized it. Yes, Mum. I looked past her. At my father. He was standing very still at the bottom of the porch steps. He did not look at me. He looked at the door behind me, at the wreath, at the porch light Daniel had installed. Deputy Alvarez, I said. Would you like to come inside? Yes, Thank you. She came in. The other deputy came in. My father came in last. I led them to the kitchen table. Before we begin, I said, I would like to give you some documents. My attorney is on her way. She'll be here in 15 minutes. But I would like you to look at these now. I handed her the deed first. She looked at it. She looked at the date. She looked at my name. She looked, very briefly, at my father. This is the original recorded deed, I said. It is the only deed that exists for this property. My name is the only name on it. It has been the only name on it for 6 years, and before that, it was my name and my late husband's. My father's name has never appeared on this deed. He has never been a co-owner of this property at any point. I see, I handed her Daniel's statement. She read it. Her eyes flicked, once, to my father, and then back to the page. I handed her the mortgage discharge. Then the letter from my mother. She read that one slowly. When she finished, she set it down and folded her hands on the table. Mrs. Reyes, she said, would you like to make a formal statement? Yes, I said. I would. I told her everything. The Tuesday morning. The moving truck. The phone call. The dinner at Renee's. I gave her the recorder. I gave her the transcript. I told her about 1998. I told her about my mother's envelope. The room was very quiet. My father did not speak. He sat in a chair at the end of the table, his hands folded the way they had been at dinner 2 nights before. And he stared at the deed in the middle of the table the way a man stares at a door that has just closed behind him. When I finished, Deputy Alvarez looked at him. Mr. Mercer, she said. Do you have anything you'd like to say at this time? He did not answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was small. Smaller than I had ever heard it. I thought I was helping, he said. Sir, Deputy Alvarez said, gently but not warmly, that's not a defense. There was a knock at the door. Lena. She came in with her work bag and a second leather folder under her arm. She introduced herself to the deputies. She sat down next to me. She looked at the documents on the table. Deputy, she said. I would like to clarify the legal situation, if I may. Please do. My client is the sole legal owner of this property and has been since 2018. The transaction her father initiated last Friday is, on its face, a fraudulent conveyance. The signature he submitted as my client's is a forgery. We have a recorded admission. We have documentary evidence of a prior, similar act in 1998 involving my client's late mother. We are prepared to cooperate fully with any criminal investigation. We are also prepared, on behalf of my client, to make the buyers whole, with the cooperation of the title insurance company, so that no innocent party suffers a financial loss. And your client's father? Lena paused. She looked at me. I looked at my father. He was looking at me now, for the first time. His eyes were wet. He did not look angry. He did not look defiant. He looked like a man who had walked into a room he had walked into 1,000 times before, and had finally noticed that all the furniture had been rearranged. My client, Elena, said carefully, is prepared to discuss the question of charges with the district attorney. She has not made a final decision. Deputy Alvarez nodded. She turned to me. Mrs. Reyes, she said, I'm going to need your signature on the formal statement before I leave today. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A complaint form. Standard language. A blank line at the bottom for my name. She held out a pen. She said. If you would. I took the pen. I looked at my father. He did not look away. I signed. It was the first time, in 3 days, that anyone had asked me to sign anything on my own house. And the only signature on the page that mattered was the real one. The district attorney's office charged my father with 2 counts. The first was forgery in the 2nd degree. The second was attempted larceny by deception. The 1998 incident was outside the statute of limitations, but the prosecutor used it, with my permission, as a sentencing argument. He called it, in the courtroom, a pattern of conduct extending over a quarter-century, against the women of his own family. My father did not go to trial. He pled guilty. He was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, a restitution order of $47,000 to cover the buyer's inspection fees, moving expenses, and legal costs, and a permanent civil judgment recognizing my sole ownership of the house. He did not go to prison. He was 73 years old. He had no prior record. The judge, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, told him, in front of the courtroom, that he was lucky he had a daughter who had not asked for more. He cried at the sentencing. I do not know if he was crying for himself or for me. I have decided that it does not matter. Marcus called me a month after the sentencing. He apologized. Not the full apology. The half apology. The kind that ends with a request. He wanted to know if I would consider lending him $8,000 to help him start a new business. He had a plan, he said. A real one this time. I told him no. I told him I loved him, and I told him no, and I told him that if he ever wanted to come to my house for dinner, he was welcome, but he was never going to ask me for money again. He did not come for dinner. He has not called since. Renee called me 3 months later. She did not ask for anything. She asked if I would meet her for coffee. We met at a diner halfway between our houses, the kind of diner where the booths are vinyl and the coffee is always too hot. She sat across from me with her hands wrapped around her cup, and she told me that she had not known about 1998. She told me that she had suspected, at dinner that Thursday, that something was wrong, but she had not let herself see it. She told me that she had spent most of her life believing the story our father had told her about me, the story of the difficult daughter, the complicated one. The third child who made everything harder. She told me she was sorry. I told her I forgave her, because I did. Renee was not our father. Renee was a woman who had been told a story about her own sister for 40 years, and who had finally, painfully, decided to stop believing it. That is a brave thing. It is not a small thing. We see each other now, once a month. Not often. But honestly. The buyers were made whole. The title insurance company paid them their down payment back within 6 weeks. They bought another house, 2 miles away, with a bigger yard. The woman sent me a card at Christmas. A picture of the little boy in the snow. On the back she had written, "We're so glad you're still in your home." He still asks about the lady with the wreath. I cried at that one. The developer pulled out of the Briar Lane project. The two adjacent lots are still empty. I do not know if he is still trying to assemble them. I do not think about it very often. My father lives alone now. Renee told me he sold his car. He does not drive anymore. He spends most of his days in his living room. He has tried to call me 3 times. I have not answered. Lena tells me that I am allowed to take as long as I need to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I want with him. She tells me there is no deadline. I think about my mother often. About the envelope in the back of her closet. About the 26 years she carried it. About the line in her letter. Tell her that I am giving her the bravery I never used. I think about how love can look like silence for a very long time, and then arrive, late, in the form of a piece of paper. I kept the house. That is the simplest part of the story. The rest is harder to say. I had Daniel's porch light replaced, finally, with a new one that does not lean. I had the blue shutters repainted, the same blue, because some things should not change. I had Hannah's height marks on the doorframe sealed with a thin coat of clear lacquer so that they will not fade. They are at 20 different heights now, the tallest one from when she was 16. I will not add another. She is taller than I am now, but the doorframe does not need to know that. Hannah graduated from the University of Vermont last May. She walked across the stage in a black gown, and she found me in the crowd, and she pointed at me, and she mouthed something I could not hear over the noise. I think it was, "We did it." I think it was, "You did it." I think it was both. She is moving home for the summer before she starts her first real job in Boston in September. She is sleeping in her old room, which I have not changed. The lavender wreath is still on the door, although it is brittle now, and I keep meaning to make a new one. I think I will make it with her. I think that is the kind of thing daughters and mothers should make together, on a Saturday, in a kitchen, in a house that no one tried hard enough to take. I have not forgiven my father. I want to be honest about that, because too many stories like this one end with a forgiveness scene, and I do not want to lie. I have not forgiven him. I do not know if I will. What I have done is something smaller and, I think, more useful. I have stopped being afraid of him. I have stopped waiting for him to see me. I have stopped expecting, after 4 to 7 years, that the man who looked through my chair at every birthday was going to look up one day and notice that I was always the strongest one at the table. He was never going to. That is not a tragedy. It is just a fact. And once you accept the fact, you can finally put down the weight of trying to change it. I think a lot, now, about what he thought he was doing. I do not think he believed he was committing a crime. I think he believed he was the head of a family, and that the head of a family is allowed to make decisions for the family, and that if those decisions hurt the people who did not understand them yet, they would understand them later. I think he believed he was doing me a favor. I think he believed, all the way up to the moment Deputy Alvarez asked him if he had anything to say, that I would eventually thank him. There is a particular kind of loneliness in being loved like that. Loved by someone who has decided, without asking you, what is good for you. Loved by someone who has confused control with care for so long that they cannot tell, anymore, which one they are giving you. My mother knew that loneliness. She lived inside it for 50 years. She wrote a letter so that I would not have to. I think about her, on quiet mornings, when I am drinking coffee on my own porch, watching the oak tree at the corner of Briar Lane. I think about the day she put that envelope in the back of her closet, 26 years ago, behind her wedding dress. I think about how she must have stood there, holding the bank slip with her own forged signature on it, and decided, in that exact moment, that she was going to wait. Not for herself. For me. I want to say one more thing. When the deputy held out the pen, that Saturday morning, and asked me to sign the complaint form, I almost did not. I thought, for a long second, that I could just hand back the deed and the letter and the recorder and pretend none of it had happened. I thought I could let my father keep his story. I thought I could be the daughter he had always wanted, the quiet one, the third one, the one who cleared the plates. And then I thought about my mother, standing in her closet in 1998, holding a piece of paper that nobody ever asked her to sign. I thought about Daniel, sitting in Laner's office 3 weeks after we moved in, signing his own name on a sworn statement to protect a wife he could not promise to outlive. I thought about Hannah, 20 years old, telling me on the phone, "You should go, because I don't want him to write the story." I thought about all the signatures, all over my life, that had been made on my behalf and without my knowledge. And I signed. I signed because it was the first time, in 47 years, that anyone in the official record of my own life had asked me, with respect, to put my own name on something that belonged to me. I signed because the deputy was asking the right question, of the right person, in the right house. I signed because my mother had waited 26 years for me to be able to. The sheriff asked for my signature, and I gave it to her, and that was the moment, after everything, that I finally became the owner of my own life. Not the house. The house had always been mine. The life. That was the part they had almost taken. That was the part one got back. And that is the part, in the end, that no one can ever sell behind your back, because once you have signed for it yourself, in your own hand, in front of the right witness, on the right morning, in the kitchen of a house that was always yours, you stop being someone who can be sold. You become someone who decides. And that, I have learned, is the only deed that ever really mattered.